She gave up everything for him and his family keeps taking more. Now she's had enough. The car was gone for years. Just gone. Handed over without a single conversation, without a single plan, and with over 100,000 miles put on it by someone who never paid 1 cent toward it. And when she finally got it back, it came back dented, beaten up, and completely wrecked in value. That is not a favor. That is not family helping family. That is one woman carrying everyone on her back while the people around her act like it is the most normal thing in the world. And here is what makes it so much worse. She saw it coming. She asked about a plan. She brought it up every few months. She was patient, she was reasonable, she tried to work within the reality of the situation. And every single time, nothing changed. No plan was made. No savings were set aside. No conversation happened. The car just stayed gone, and her concerns just stayed ignored. She was not asking for the moon. She was not demanding that everything stop so that her needs could be centered. She was asking for basic acknowledgement that the arrangement had an end date, that somebody else in the relationship understood this was temporary and was thinking about what came next. She never got it. Not once. So let us go back to the very beginning, because this story does not start with a car. It starts with a woman who uprooted her entire life for a relationship that was still brand new. She had been living 15 hours away from her home state, and she had every intention of going back. That was her plan. That was her life. The familiar streets, the people who knew her name, the particular comfort of being somewhere that felt like it belonged to her. Then she got pregnant, and she made the choice to stay. Not because she wanted to live in a cold Midwestern state far from everyone she loved, not because it was her dream, but because she wanted to raise her child with her partner. She made that decision quietly and without drama, the way a lot of women do, folding her own needs into a smaller shape so that the family unit could hold together. That was the sacrifice she made on day one, and it was enormous. And he was not willing to meet her halfway on that. He would not consider moving to her home state. The place she knew, the place where her support system lived, the place that felt like home to her. She gave that up and he gave up nothing. And I want you to really sit with that for a moment, because it is easy to let it slide past. She left her world. She left the people who would have shown up for her in a crisis, the friends who would have brought food after a hard week, the family who would have held her babies so she could sleep. She traded all of that for a state she had not chosen, and he did not have to trade anything. That is the foundation this entire relationship is built on, and it is important to understand that before anything else happens in this story, she was already at a disadvantage. Then his family arrived. His mother, his grandmother, his aunt, all immigrating to the same town, all with essentially no money and no stability. And look, supporting family through immigration is understandable. It is even admirable in a lot of ways. People come to a new country with nothing and they lean on the people they have. That is human. That is real. But what followed was not just a family leaning on each other during a hard time. What followed was years of one-sided financial support that nobody ever acknowledged, nobody ever repaid, and nobody ever even seemed to notice. It was support that flowed in one direction only, quietly bleeding the household dry while everyone smiled and called it love. The mother moved in with the brother and his wife and immediately tried to take over the home. She rearranged things without asking, reorganizing spaces that were not hers as if ownership were simply a matter of who was most comfortable asserting it. She made plans to bring more people into a house that was not hers, treating it like a staging ground for the rest of the family's arrival. She used the couple's car as if it had been offered, even though no offer had been made. And when that couple had to make a financial decision that resulted in the car going away, the mother blamed the pregnant wife. Let that land. She blamed a pregnant woman for making a reasonable financial decision in her own home, as if the audacity of having financial limits was a personal attack. And then when they finally moved out, that same pregnant woman cleaned out the mother's belongings herself. While pregnant. On her hands and knees, sorting through someone else's things, in a body that was already carrying more than its share. Because the mother could not be bothered. This woman watched all of that happen and she stayed patient. She watched her partner hand over his car without a discussion, without even a heads up, as if her opinion on a shared financial matter simply did not occur to him to seek. She watched the money drain out slowly, a car payment here, a lease payment there, a phone bill over there, always one more thing, always one more emergency, always one more reason why the family needed something and her family's savings could not grow. She sat with the anxiety of watching their financial cushion get thinner and thinner while staying calm enough not to blow the whole thing apart. She did not blow up. She asked questions. She tried to make plans. She kept hoping things would stabilize. That kind of sustained patience takes a toll that is almost impossible to see from the outside. Then the mother started scamming people. Not borrowing money. Not asking for help. Actually fabricating stories about sick relatives and deportation threats to con people out of money. We are talking about tens of thousands of dollars taken from real people who trusted her, people who saw a family in need and opened their wallets because they believed the story was real. She used photos of a dying cousin as a prop and a lie, turning someone's genuine suffering into a fundraising tool. She targeted her own son's friends, people who cared about the family and responded to what they believed was a real crisis. She even tried it on her other son's friends. This is not a woman who is down on her luck and making desperate choices. This is a pattern. This is who she is. And yet the partner still does not see it as a concern. That detail sat with me hard. Because you can argue about cultural differences in family dynamics all day long, and some of those arguments are worth having. Obligations to parents, multi-generational living, pooling resources across a household, there are genuine and meaningful conversations to be had about how different families operate. But scamming people is not a cultural difference. Lying to vulnerable people, stealing money using fake emergencies, manufacturing a dying relative to drain someone's bank account, that is not something that gets a pass because of where someone is from. And the fact that the partner looks at all of that and shrugs, looks at his mother recording his partner's home and mocking her to family across the world, capturing the private interior of the life they built together and turning it into content for people who already dislike her, and still does not see a problem, that says something very important about where his priorities actually live. It means the threshold for concern is set somewhere his mother has never come close to crossing. And then there is the gaming. 4 to 5 hours a day. With the kids home. With a baby who had a stroke and has brain damage and needs constant attention, a child whose care requires a level of vigilance that most people cannot even imagine. With a 5-year-old who wanted something from his dad and got told the game could not be paused. Picture that for a second. A little kid, still young enough to believe his dad wants to spend time with him, walking up and asking for something simple, and being told no because of a screen. She was making dinner. The child needed tending. And his solution was that he literally could not stop what he was doing. Not would not. Could not. As if the game had him physically restrained. As if a controller were stronger than a child's voice asking for his father. This is the moment the ticket got bought. And honestly, it is hard to blame her. She had been holding everything together for years, isolated from her own support system, watching money flow out toward people who never gave anything back, raising children largely on her own while her partner played games and deferred every hard conversation about his family. She had been running on empty for so long that she probably forgot what it felt like to have something left in the tank. And in that moment, standing in a kitchen that felt like a job she had never applied for, listening to a gaming session continue uninterrupted behind a closed door, something in her must have shifted. Not broken. Shifted. She went and she bought a ticket home. To her people. To the state she gave up. To the version of herself that existed before all of this. Buying that ticket was not an overreaction. It was the first time in a very long time that she did something purely for herself. Here is something that needs to be said clearly. She is not being hypocritical for accepting help from her own mother. Her partner tried to use that as a gotcha moment, saying it is the same thing, that she accepts help from her mom, so how is he any different helping his family? But it is completely different. Her mother is in a stable financial position and is choosing to help her child who is struggling. His mother is in a financially unstable position, contributes nothing back, has actively cost the family money, has violated their privacy, has scammed people, and shows no signs of ever becoming self-sufficient. Those are not the same situation. They are not even close to the same situation. One is a lifeline extended from solid ground. The other is two people underwater trying to pull from each other. She also mentioned something that deserves more attention than it might seem. The mother told her 5-year-old that they do not like Mexico because of the shooting. She said that to a 5-year-old child. She used a phrase about violence to explain a cultural tension to a small child who had no business hearing any of it. Think about what that does to a child who is still forming her understanding of where she comes from, who she is, and which pieces of her identity are safe to hold. Half of that little girl comes from Mexico. Half of her family, half of her blood, half of the stories that will make up her sense of self. And a grandmother who was supposed to be a source of warmth and belonging looked at that child and planted a seed of fear and division instead. Not by accident. Casually. As if it were a perfectly reasonable thing to say at any volume in any room. This is a grandmother actively poisoning her grandchild against one side of her own identity, and doing it casually, like it is just conversation. That is not a boundary issue. That is a character issue. And now there is an $8,000 dental bill for the grandmother on top of the $4,000 in property taxes that are already overdue, on top of the dental work she herself has needed for years but has had to skip because they cannot afford it. She is sitting with her own pain, her own unmet medical needs, quietly putting them off month after month so the family budget can stretch to cover everyone else. She is buying second-hand clothes for her babies. She became a stay-at-home mom not by choice but because her infant daughter had a stroke and needs care, because that level of need does not fit neatly into a daycare drop-off schedule. And somewhere in all of that, her partner is still playing video games for 4 to 5 hours and talking about splitting his grandmother's dental bill with 2 other people who have no money. She asked a simple question at the end of her post. Is she being a brat? Is she being hypocritical? Is this normal? And the answer to all 3 is no. No, she is not being a brat. No, she is not being hypocritical. And no, this is not normal. Here is the verdict, and she deserves to hear it plainly. She is not the problem in this relationship. She has given up her home state, her proximity to her support system, her financial stability, her dental health, and years of her peace of mind. She has done it quietly and with patience and while still trying to be fair and understanding about cultural differences that were never explained to her up front. She entered this relationship without a full picture of what she was agreeing to, and by the time the picture became clear, she had 2 children and a life that was hard to walk away from. The partner is not a monster. He clearly loves his family and he is trying to support people he cares about. But love and enabling are not the same thing. Helping someone who scams people and never saves a dollar is not love, it is a cycle that will never end. And choosing a video game over your child in a moment when your partner is stretched thin and your kid is asking for you, that is a choice. That tells you where the priorities are arranged when nobody is watching. The real question is not whether she is being a brat. The real question is whether he is capable of seeing what she actually needs, not just what his family needs. Because right now the scales are not balanced. They are not even in the same room. And if he cannot look at everything she has described and understand why she bought that ticket, then she has her answer. Some people do not change until they are standing in an empty house. And some people never change at all. Sister made it a whole thing. 10:10 p.m. For dogs. At a grandmother's birthday weekend. with a crawling baby on the floor and a 2-year-old running around in an unfamiliar house 6 hours from home. And the sister's position is that boarding them is expensive and she is not willing to rearrange her life for it. Let us just sit with that for a second, because the audacity is real. Okay, so here is the full picture. This woman and her husband have kept a beautiful family tradition alive since their grandfather passed away. Every July they load up 2 tiny kids, drive 6 hours, and show up for their grandmother's birthday. They even board their own 2 dogs to make the trip as smooth as possible. That is not a small thing. Packing for 2 children under 3 alone is a logistical undertaking most people would rather not think about. There are car seats and snack bags and nap schedules and diaper bags and a stroller and toys to keep everyone sane on a 6-hour drive. And on top of all of that, this couple takes the extra step of arranging care for their own dogs because they understand that some situations call for simplicity over convenience. That is commitment. That is love for family shown through action, not just words. Her sister texts asking to join that same weekend. And on the surface that sounds sweet. She wants to see the grandmother too, she wants to be part of the tradition. But the sister has 4 dogs, and this woman has been uncomfortable with those dogs around her kids for a while now. This is not a new concern she invented to be difficult. She gave the sister a genuine chance when her first child was 13 months old, and during that visit the sister did not watch the dogs at all. She just let them move freely while a baby who could barely walk navigated the same space. That discomfort the narrator felt then was not abstract. It was the specific, stomach-tightening awareness that something could go wrong and nobody else in the room seemed to be paying attention to that possibility. The concern is grounded in real experience, not paranoia. So she did everything right. She thanked her sister for asking ahead of time instead of just showing up. She explained clearly and kindly that she did not want the dogs there because of the stress it would add with 2 very young children in an unfamiliar environment. She even used her own dogs as a reference point, explaining that she and her husband had deliberately chosen not to bring their dogs on this particular trip to keep things manageable and calm. Think about how reasonable that framing is. She was not saying your dogs are dangerous or your dogs are a problem. She was saying this weekend has a certain energy we are trying to protect, and even our own dogs did not make the cut. She was transparent, she was considerate, and she gave a real and honest reason rooted in practical reality. And the sister's response was to make it about herself completely. Boarding is expensive. The dogs are part of her life. She is not willing to rearrange things. And then the kicker, she basically said that means she will probably only see them about once a year. As if that is a threat. As if the sister showing up with 4 dogs to a home that is not hers, to a weekend that is already established and running smoothly, is simply the price of entry to maintaining a relationship with her nieces and nephew. You can almost feel the shift in the conversation when that line landed. The sister was not trying to find a solution. She was building a case. She had already decided the answer was no, and she was explaining why the blame belonged to someone else. Here is what nobody is saying out loud but needs to be said. The sister is not being asked to give up her dogs permanently. She is not being asked to rehome them or scale back her entire life or never see her family again. She is being asked to make one accommodation, for one weekend, for a grandmother's birthday celebration that her sister has been faithfully driving 6 hours to attend for years. One weekend out of 52. That is it. And the sister turned that into a referendum on her entire lifestyle, as though the request itself was an act of aggression rather than a reasonable boundary drawn by a mother trying to keep her children safe in a space she does not control. The crawling baby detail is the one that gets me every time. Because people who have not had a baby at the crawling and cruising stage sometimes forget what that actually looks like in practice. That baby is on the floor constantly. That baby is pulling on furniture, tasting things off the ground, grabbing at whatever is within reach, and moving in unpredictable directions at all times with absolutely no awareness of personal space or animal body language. Now place 4 dogs of unknown temperament into that same environment. For dogs who have just completed a long drive, who are already overstimulated by new smells and unfamiliar furniture and strangers and noise. For dogs who are not in their own home and who have no established routine in this space. And then place that crawling baby among them. That is not a small or theoretical risk. That is a situation requiring constant, active, divided attention on top of everything that already comes with managing 2 children under 3 in someone else's house. And she already knows from lived experience that the sister does not provide that attention. She tested that exact scenario. It did not go well. She watched her 13-month-old move around that room while the sister remained unbothered, unconcerned, paying no meaningful attention to where the dogs were relative to where the baby was. And she felt that particular kind of maternal dread, the kind that makes you hypervigilant and exhausted simultaneously. The kind where you cannot enjoy anything because you are doing the job of monitoring not just your own child but also someone else's animals because that someone else simply is not doing it. She decided she was not returning to that feeling. That is called learning from experience. That is called protecting your children. So here is the bottom line on this one. She is not being unreasonable. Not even slightly. She made a fair, clearly explained, advance request with kindness and context. She was not rude about it. She was not demanding the sister never bring her dogs anywhere ever or suggesting that loving dogs is somehow a character flaw. She simply said not this weekend, not around my babies, not in a situation I cannot control and cannot trust others to help me manage. That is a mother doing her job without apology. The sister had options. She could board the dogs for one weekend. She could visit the grandmother on a different weekend when the dynamic was simpler. She could come to the birthday weekend without the dogs and make one quiet exception for one occasion that clearly matters deeply to the whole family. She chose none of those things. She chose instead to reframe the entire conversation as an attack on her lifestyle and translate a single boundary into a reason to see her family less. That is a choice, and it reveals something significant about where the sister's priorities actually sit. What this really comes down to is who is actually making the effort in this family. This woman loads up 2 babies, drives 6 hours, boards her own dogs, shows up every single year without complaint, and keeps a tradition alive out of genuine love and devotion to her grandmother. The sister cannot board 4 dogs for one single weekend without turning it into a personal grievance and a reason to withdraw. Those are not equivalent levels of investment. They are not even in the same category. And frankly, if the dogs are a deal breaker for the sister, then the sister has made her decision about what matters most to her. That is her right. But she does not get to blame her family for the consequences of the choice she made all on her own. NTA. Not even close. So if you made it all the way through both of these stories, drop a comment below telling me which one hit harder for you. And if you want more stories like these, a like and a subscribe would genuinely mean a lot.